break, and I'd like to take some time to look at calling methods that are in a class different from the one from which you're calling them. So here I've got two classes. One is calling math methods, and you'll see it's just an outline right here, and then another class called math methods. So let's look at math methods. Math methods actually has 5 methods, each one a little different. These 5 math methods just accept 2 ints and then do something to them. We've got add 2 numbers, subtract 2 numbers, mult, div, and then mod. So we're doing the regular math operations. Now these methods are a little different one from the other, and so let's look at them. Here I've got the first, and that's add 2 nums. It's public, it's static, it returns an int. It's named add 2 nums, and it wants 2 ints passed into it. So this one, as a public method, can be called from outside the class in which it resides. It's a static method, so it can be called by simply using the name of the class, mathmethods dot name of the method. Pretty simple. It returns back the sum of the 2 numbers that were passed into it. It refers to those 2 numbers as n1 and n2. So that's our first method. Second method is public static. It's void. It doesn't return anything back. It's called sub2nums, and it subtracts the second number from the first and then just prints that to the screen. Our next method is private. It's static. It returns an int. It's called mult2nums, and it multiplies the 2 numbers passed in. Does that by calling the method add2nums within a loop, and then returns back the product of that multiplication. So this one's a little different. It's a private method. It cannot be called from the outside. It can only be called from within the method in which it resides, and that's math methods. Then we go to our next method, and that's public and double. It's div2nums, and it wants 2 ints passed into it. This one actually tests the second number, because what this method will do is it'll divide the first number passed in by the second. If that second number is a 0, we've got division by 0. That's illegal, and so in this method we test to see if the second number is 0. If it is, we give a message and return back 0.0. If the second number passed in is not equal to 0, we just do the division and pass back the result. The last method is public. It's non-static, and this is our first of the, well, it's the first one we've looked at that's non-static in any depth, and it's called mod2nums. Now this one is a non-static method, and it's non-static because we don't declare it to be static, just as here in public double div2nums. This one is non-static. We haven't declared it to be static. So a non-static method can't be called simply using the name in which the method resides, the name of the class. You have to call it using an instance of the class in which it resides. So let's look how we'd call these methods. So we're going to do that over here in calling math methods. And so what I did was I just copied the first lines of all those methods to help us remember. So let's look at calling add2nums. And add2nums is a method in math methods. It's public. It's static. It returns back an int and wants 2 ints passed into it. So as a public method, I can call it from within this, the class calling math methods. Specifically, I'm in the main method of that class. So to call this method add2nums, it's public, so I know I can call it from outside the class in which it resides. It's static, so I call it by just using the name of the class in which it resides dot name of the method. So this add2nums resides here in math methods. So in the class calling math methods, I'll call it this way by simply using the name of the class in which it resides, math methods dot name of the method, and that's add2nums, and I'm going to pass it 2 ints. Let me pass it 5 and 3. And so this method add2nums, we know, returns back an int. That's what it does. It returns back an int here. And I'm going to take that int that was passed back and pass it to system.out.println. And so I should have printed to the screen what is returned by add2nums. And when I pass it 5 and 3, that should give me 8. So let's compile this. And I've got a problem on compilation that I am told I can't find the simple math methods. Well, math methods is the name of the class I want to call, and it's math methods. And I look at this, it's math methods dot add2nums, that's the name of it. I got here, I've got there, I've got that, I've got that. Looks good to me. Can't find the symbol. Add two nums. Well, my problem is just simple capitalization. I know I call it with math methods dot name of the method, but my method is add two nums with a lowercase n. So let's put that lowercase n in, compile again, and I clean compile. Be careful with your typing. So it's compiled fine. When I run this class calling math methods, and I'm therefore running this main method, when I run it I should have printed to the script method add two nums within the math methods class, and I called it with the name of the class math methods because the method is static. I called it with math methods dot add two nums, the name of the method, and I passed it two ints as it requires and returned back a number. So let's look at the next method. We've looked at add two nums. Let's look at one of the other methods here in this class, and let's look at this one, which is sub two nums. Now what sub two nums does is it doesn't return anything back, it's just void. And so it prints something to the screen. Now I'll call sub two nums much as I did add two nums, but here I don't have to pass it back to a system.out.println because it itself prints it to the screen. So I'll call mathmethods.sub2nums. I'll pass it 5 and 3. And it should print to the screen because that's what sub2nums does. So let's compile. And as we run it, we should have 3 subtracted from 5, and that is 2, printed to the screen. And that is after the first 8, and so that's indeed what we have. So here, this method, sub2nums, is a void method. Doesn't return anything back. It just prints to the screen. So no need to pass that to another method, no need to save it, whatever. Let's look at mult2nums. Mult2nums is interesting in that it calls itself add two nums. We go through a series of a loop, a series of iterations. Now, mult2nums is private, static, int. So let's call it. And what we'll do with mult2nums is where it returns back an int, we'll print that to the screen. So let's just cheat a little bit. We'll copy this. And what I'll pass to system.out.println will be math methods.mult2nums. And I'll pass it 5 and 3. And so we'll compile. And I'm yacked at. And I'm yacked at because mult2nums is a private method. It can't be called from outside the class in which it resides. Math methods has a method, mult2nums, but it's private. I can only call mult2nums from within math methods. I cannot call it from the outside. And so here, where I try to call math methods.mult2nums, I just can't do that. I can't call mult2nums from outside the class in which it resides. This line just won't compile, won't run. I just can't do it. So a private method can't be called from outside the class in which it resides. Well, let's look at another method. Let's look at div2nums. Well, this one's public, double, not too different, except that it has 2 return statements. And so let's just look at that one for now, just to give us an example. And so that's div2nums, and what it does is return something back. So I'm going to call div2nums, and remember that it as a method is public and static, and as a public static, div2nums is not static. I have to call this differently then. I can't call it the regular way because it's a non-static method. If I try to do this right here, right, system.out.println, I'm passing to it mathmethods.div2nums. And when I try to compile, I'm going to get yacked at because div2nums is a non-static method. It can't be called using the name of the class in which it resides. It can only be called by using an instance of the class in which it resides. So for me to call div2nums, I have to do this. I have to create an instance of the class math methods. And I'm going to do that this way with math methods, and I'm going to call my instance x just for simplicity. And it is a new instance of the class math methods. And so with this, I am creating an instance of the class math methods. An instance of the class math methods may call a non-static method within math methods. So instead of calling div2nums with math methods.div2nums, I'm going to have x call div2nums. And now we see as I compile, I have a clean compile, and when I run, I'll see that this call to div2nums will execute. It'll multiply 5 times 3, right? And then return that value back, and I'll print it to the screen. So as I run, indeed I have 5 divided by 3, and that's printed to the screen. We want to make the point to be clear that this div2nums is a non-static method. As a non-static method, it needs to be called by an instance of the class in which it resides. Here, mod2nums is also a non-static method, so I would call it in a similar fashion. I'd have to have it called by an instance of the class. And so here I could very easily call mod2nums, and I could have it called by the same instance, x, of the class mathMethods. So I will have x call mod2nums, and it will mod 5 by 3, and as I run it, I should have the last number printed to the screen, should be 2, and indeed that's what I have. So we've looked at several methods and how to call them. These methods, 5 methods, are within the class mathMethods. In order to call them, I have to do so being aware that how they were written. A public method can be called from outside the class in which it resides. A static method can be called using the name of the class in which it resides dot the name of the method. A private method may only be called from inside the class in which it resides. A non-static method, that is a method that has not been declared static, may only be called by an instance of the class in which it resides. So we've looked at several different methods. Methods are useful tools. You'll make your own. You'll use those that come with the language. You need to be aware how they're called. Here we've looked at calling methods from within a class, that are in a class. Right? And we're calling those methods from another class. Thank you very much.